Does it feel like something's gotten into your dog lately? Like they're just a little bit more edgy and reactive than they have been in the past, but there's not been like one single event that can kind of explain away their behavior? My name's Kristen and I'm from Salty Pack, and we're going to be talking about the layered stress model today, which has a lot of ideas that you might have not considered before we even dive into your dog's triggers. So the idea of the layered stress model has probably been around for a while, and it's a concept that you're going to go, oh, that makes sense in my head. But when it was first sort of explained to me, I remember the exact time that I heard it was from Jay Jack, who is an American-based dog trainer. And I'm about to give the example that really kind of clicked everything for me into place. So imagine that your partner gets home and you serve them up dinner because you're doing something really nice for them, but it's a little bit of like an undercooked meatloaf. Your partner gets down, they like dive into it and finds out that it's undercooked, and they just lose it. So as humans, we can probably understand that reactive state of being to the undercooked meatloaf doesn't need a protocol to be able to counter condition your partner to the meatloaf and going through all these different kind of protocols. We're going to sit down with your partner and go, what happened, right? We can understand that at a human level, that there's probably a lot on their plate other than just the undercooked meatloaf that they have now had this huge reactive blow up over. Your partner then proceeds to tell you about how their day started with a lack of sleep. They were late to work, which then meant that they were chewed out by their boss. Then after that, they realized that they forgot their lunch, and so they were hungry all day. So over time, all of that day's stress has just stacked to what we call trigger stacking. And so this is truly what we kind of know as the straw that broke the camel's back. So it wasn't the meatloaf, it was everything else throughout the day. All right, so for the sake of this conversation, let's say that we have 100 points of stress before we tip over our threshold. Your partner has come home with 95 points and the meatloaf situation is only 10. But because they had 95 points when they got home, the extra 10 tipped them over the threshold. Whereas if they had come home on a different day, say that they only had 50 or 60 points, that meatloaf situation, they're going to be able to deal with it a lot better. So then we think about it for our dogs. Is the trigger actually what's making them kind of tip over threshold? Or is it all of the other stressors that have led up to that moment that they then see their trigger as well too? So if we can manage a little bit of our dog's stressors underneath and making sure that we're taking care of everything that we're doing with our dogs, they might get to the trigger then and go, oh, I can manage this a lot better because I have much less stress in my life as well too. Remember that all stress is not bad. There's good stress and bad stress. That's not this conversation, right? We're usually talking about the stress that's like a little bit too much and just built up. So that's why it's really important to understand understand and recognize for each individual dog how that layered stress model is going to work for them. Get it? Okay, so before we dive into the layered stress model, just a really quick overview of it. And again, we'll just dive into these a little bit more in depth. So if I can figure out how to get the graphic to show up somewhere here. Amazing. At the base layer is going to be our communication. We've got to figure out some way to communicate with this different species that lives in our house. The next one up from there is health and well-being. Then we get into lifestyle, and that can include a little bit of like a genetic component to it. After that is clarity, and we'll talk about why some dogs need more clarity than others. Then we get into leash communication and understanding. And then finally at the top, if we really need to, then we address triggers as part of that layered stress model. So our base is our communication, right? We've probably all felt at one point or another that we are living with an entirely different species. So for us to figure out how to communicate with our dogs and our dogs to figure out how to communicate with us can actually put on a little bit of stress. Go back to those puppy days and you're like, what do you want, right? It would almost be like you are trying to speak Chinese and your dog is trying to speak Spanish, and neither of you guys can pick up what the other one is saying. So there's quite a lot of stress that comes into that until we can figure out how to communicate with our dogs. The next layer up on the layered stress model is health and well-being. It's pretty easy to dismiss or excuse a dog who has bitten because they have a broken leg. So putting that aside, I assume that if your dog has a broken leg, you're not here. please go to the vet. This is talking about more kind of those chronic and acute things that might be adding into a little bit of the stress of your dog's everyday life. I'm talking about poor sleep, bad nutrition, maybe skin conditions, stuff with aching joints, maybe tired muscles. These are all things that, again, inherently for us as humans, we're like, yeah, that makes me pretty irritable as well. If I personally haven't slept or eaten probably in the last 2 or 3 hours, I'm going to be a little bit more irritable. So we have to give considerations to our dogs. Have you even considered, like, your dog probably can have a headache. They can have on and off days. They're sentient beings. So as part of this layered stress model, it's very important to put health and well-being into the consideration before we even look at leash walking or our dog's triggers. I'll give you a personal example with my dog Moose. So as he was getting a little bit older, at around age 7, we started to take him to the physio. Mostly I was like, oh, I'm being an awesome dog owner, not even dog trainer, dog owner, taking him to the physio just to make sure that he's all taken care of as he gets older. And on the very first physio visit that we had, she said that he probably has had hip dysplasia for a lot of his life. Me thinking that Moose has just kind of always been a little bit of like a lazier border collie and has had some like reactivity throughout his life. I went, oh no. So he's kind of been in pain for most of his life. This has been really apparent to me of how important this layered stress model is and how much health and well-being can play into it. Over the last 3 years, we've worked really hard. Moose feels awesome. He's just turned 10 and he's spicier and sassier than ever, and his reactivity is way less. So whether it is a whole bunch of different factors, I'm sure a little bit of his age and things like that I must consider as well too, of course. But he just overall just feels better. I know that if anybody has gone through that journey with their dog, it's really hard to put in words. They just feel better. So make sure to consider health and well-being for your dog as part of the holistic picture of what we're looking at. So a significant health improvement that we can probably all make as humans, as well as for our dogs, is by looking at nutrition. Now again, caveat, I am not a canine nutritionist by any means, but I have done quite a lot of research. I've seen a lot of N-of-1 experiments with a lot of my client dogs, as well as my own dogs who are now just all sleeping while I film this, which is lovely. So when we look at a lot of our pet dog clients' diets when we come into the initial consults, most of them are being fed kibble, which is totally fine. There's nothing inherently bad about kibble. But if you look at the back of most kibble bags, you're going to find a lot of vitamins and nutrients. Now, if things were naturally occurring in there, we probably wouldn't need to actually have them in. So a lot of those vitamins and nutrients are actually added back into the kibble because of the high heat processing it goes through. So that will actually kill off a lot of those vitamins and nutrients, which is why companies need to put it back in. So again, kibble's not inherently bad, but we do prefer as much as possible to do a fresh and raw food feeding. What that can just look like is anything that's going off in your fridge, you can just have your dogs eat. So they might get a little bit of your leftovers or things like that. As long as it's safe for them, anything is better than nothing. When you're looking at kibbles, make sure that you understand that not all kibble is created equally as well. So I'll provide a link for American and Australian dog owners that they can look at, and it basically you just punch in your kibble that you've been feeding your dog, and you can kind of see how well it rates. Just because it's a very expensive brand doesn't actually mean that it's a very good quality, so just a heads up for that one. With our, in the conversation of nutrition as well too, most of our initial consults, people don't generally love this, but I'm calling a lot of people out for having their dogs a little bit too overweight. What I would prefer to see is just slightly underweight or perfect weighted dogs. The reason for that is, again, it's kind of inherently obvious for us as humans as well too. The more overweight that we are, the more prone we are to getting more diseases, health concerns, things like that. So it's the same thing that goes for our dogs. They're pretty much finding that there's some proof in the pudding by doing some studies showing that dogs who are kept underweight can live years longer than some of their overweight counterparts. So the kind of like general rule that you can go off of is if you can kind of feel the outline of your dog's like last few ribs, and if you're looking at a bird's eye view, you want to be able to see kind of their chest tuck in before it comes out to their hips. If you're looking at a straight sausage, your dog's probably a little bit too big. So again, just for our health and longevity, nutrition is a really important thing to consider as part of our health in the layered stress model. So the next thing that we consider is biological fulfillment and lifestyle. So if we look at every dog is going to be super individual. Mostly there's some breed standards that's going to want to be doing some things that light their heart on fire. But ask yourself, what would your dog be doing if they weren't in the confines of your home? Now, what that doesn't mean is you don't have to look at your Kelpie going, I can hardly afford the rental property that I'm in at the moment. Regardless, I can't buy them a massive big property with a bunch of sheep for them to herd. But we must Good. We must acknowledge what Mother Nature has put into them that they would want to be doing for most of the day, and how can we give them a bit of a surrogate activity to be able to fulfill their needs. Good girlie. This is flirt pole with Spice the Kelpie, right? So this is going to be pretty similar to what she might be doing. So we must consider things like exercise, activities, social interactions, so that we can give our dogs as close to what Mother Nature intended them to be doing. You might have a dog that you haven't found what sets their heart on fire, and you might need to do a little bit of exploring. Nice. Get it. Nice. Good job, girly. Good job, sweetie. So another personal anecdote with one of my own dogs, Artie, my Belgian Malinois. This is a little bit more of like a prevention rather than a progression story. Artie was, let's face it, bred to bite. Some of his brothers and sisters are still part of the government program that I got him from, and they are literally tracking down bad guys and apprehending them with their teeth. So that is something that Mother Nature has put into that dog. We can see it through some of the genetics that he is part of. So with that, if I don't give him the outlet to bite, use his nose, problem solve, there's just going to be a whole bunch of really bad behaviors that are probably going to come from that because they're unresolved and unpointed at. So with Artie, we kind of set up like a artificial conflict fight over our arbitrary thing to fight over, which is the ball and the string. Do you want to fuck shit up? Good boy. So if I didn't let him use everything that Mother Nature has told him that he needs to bite, problem solve, use his nose, doing all those things, then again, he's going to start to come back at me. So of course I'm going to give him this toy. Artie is super reactive prone. I would kind of expect most Belgian Malinois to be, and a lot of other working dogs as well too. He has to be ready for any sort of fight that he needs to get into. Good job, my boy. Whoa. So if I can give him the outlet that he wants in play, doing a bit of spooky stuff as well too. If I can give him the outlet that he wants in play, the amount of relaxation, fulfillment that I can see from him, worth his weight in gold, right? So that is all about giving him a little bit of the biological and genetic outlet that he truly wants to express. Wow, so strong. So the reality is that every person needs a level of clarity, as well as every dog needs a level of clarity. This example I also heard from Jay, but it was really applicable to my situation as well too. So if I go to a social outing, I need to know a little bit of what to expect. Yes. My husband can rock up anywhere, right? And be totally fine. He'll just cruise along with the situation. For me, I need to know, is it a work function? Is it a birthday party? What are we kind of walking into? I need to have a level of expectation, and definitely for me, the most important thing, when is dinner gonna be served? If I have that level of clarity, I have way less stress and anxiety about going into that situation because I already have a certain layer of what to expect. So kind of same thing here for our dogs as well too. Yes. Some dogs are gonna need a lot more clarity in their lives, whereas other more confident dogs are just going to be able to roll with the punches no matter what comes up for them. So have a think about that in terms of how much clarity we're giving to our dogs to be able to set them up for success and reduce any layer of extra stressors for them. Notice how you might be thinking that your problem is leash manners and reactivity, but there's so many more things to consider beforehand. Okay, but everybody's actually here for the leash, so we're finally getting to it. But before we talk about the leash, I have to talk about space. So if we were going for a hike, maybe a little bit like what we're doing with Cameron at the moment, and you're going out with a friend, and if you guys weren't in each other's like 1.3 to like 3 meter bubble, maybe say your friend was like walking like 10 meters ahead, you'd be like, dude, are you okay? Like, are you mad at me? So for us as humans, we have a much closer proximity space that we find socially appropriate. Cameron, good job, girl. Whereas dogs, you might have even experienced this before in the past with your dog, like they might be 10 to 40 meters and they'll check it like out when they're in front or something going like, you're still here? Cool, we're doing the things together. So their space and proximity for social distance is much, Cameron, is much greater than ours is. So we put them on leashes going, look, I'm going to take you into this portal into the world. We're going to walk in the sun together. We're doing all the great things. Like, why is there so much frustration around it? But for a dog, it would be like us going back to that hike with a friend. It'd be like you guys have your shoelaces tied or you're holding hands the whole time. Like, super cute at first, but it gets really frustrating after a while. You're like, mate, I need to do my own stepping. So the dogs will hold a lot of frustration with the leash. So ask yourself first, when we're looking at leash communication, before we even get to triggers, if there's nothing around, how does your dog go walking, Cameron, on the leash? Do they understand what the pressure means, like that communication that Cameron just got there? Do they understand that they shouldn't continue to keep pulling through it? And is the leash actually holding quite a lot of frustration as part of your relationship together? And finally, if we have good communication with our dogs, we have investigated or can at least assume that they are in good health. We are giving them the genetic outlet and fulfilling them as closely as Mother Nature intended to. We are providing them with as much clarity as the individual dog needs, and we've tidied up our leash communication. Usually about 95% of the time, we don't need to deal with triggers. But if you've gone, Kristen, no, I've done everything and I've made sure that everything has been ticked off in that layered stress model, then of course, let's deal with the triggers. But most of the time, we don't need to. But by the time that we do need to, if that is genuinely you, because there are gonna be some dogs who do have their genuine triggers, it's gonna be way easier because we've already taken care of pretty much everything else underneath. So the process of doing that is going to be way less stress for you and your dog. So if you are working through leash communication or triggers with your dog, which really that's probably why most of you guys are here, work your way up the layered stress model first to see if there's even things that you need to work on or if everything is going to take care of itself. Nice girly. In an online world filled with a ton of good dog trainers, I'm really, really humbled that you have chosen Salty Pack as the place to get your information about dog training. If you want more videos like this one, click on this button. If you would like to subscribe to the page, please click on this one. It really does help us as a small page that the more subscribers or likes or comments or whatever you're supposed to do on YouTube, the more engagement that we have, the better off we're gonna find more dog owners like you to be giving out free dog training advice. Thank you again. We'll see you next time.